There was a time not long ago when Dallas looked at their professional basketball franchise with hope and pride. Back when Mark Cuban brashly walked the sidelines and Dirk Nowitzki's golden locks danced in the wind. It was a shining stretch of high-flying offenses and sweet-shooting swingmen captured on grainy, oversized cameras. And in 2004, it was approaching a pinnacle with Dirk, Michael Finley, Steve Nash, and Sixth Man of the Year Antoine Jamison. Dallas was building an offensive hive mind 10 years before anyone knew how to deal with it. They had great decision-makers everywhere, scorers capable of capitalizing on open looks or creating ones themselves, and knockdown shooters lining the perimeter. It wasn't going to be their year yet. Mike Bibby and C. Webb made sure of that, but things were looking up. For now, they would be watching the finals at home, and among the ones paying close attention was the aforementioned brash team owner. Mark Cuban had watched his Mavericks suffer at the hands of that young LA superstar in that number 8 jersey year after year. The Pistons, more so than anyone else at least, were containing Kobe Bryant. Yeah, he was still scoring. He was Kobe after all. But it didn't look the same. He was working for every bucket, straining to get shots over defenders. At the end of the series, the stats verified the eye test. 22.6 points per game and 38% from the field was passable. But it wasn't the kind of performance we had come to expect from Bryant. The Pistons had game planned for this. They were bumping, checking, and walling Kobe on the perimeter just slightly. Not stopping him, but slowing him, giving the Wallace brothers time to rotate and meet him at the rim. Thanks to the officiating guidelines on speed, balance, rhythm, and quickness, it was entirely legal. But Mark Cuban, owning a high-flying, fast-paced basketball team of his own, took issue with this. He believed this kind of contact was more than marginal, and while he applauded the Pistons for taking advantage, he met with David Stern and requested the rules be changed. Now, the chains were released. Offensive attackers were free to pressure the rim, emboldened by the knowledge that any bump, nudge, or push would mean a violation for the opposing team. Cooler heads had prevailed, and now the league was about to look drastically different. The days of bruising and barreling were coming to a close, and in its place, the age of skill and finesse was being born. Now, what would that look like, and who would it benefit? Flash forward 2 years later, and the Mavericks look different now. Dirk is still there, but flanking him are Josh Howard and Jason Terry. And in relief, they have Jerry Stackhouse coming off the bench. They aren't as loose as they used to be, not as aggressive or flashy, but they were undeniably better. And at the top of the list of reasons why was that floppy-haired German himself. The new guidelines played precisely to Dirk's strengths. No big was quick enough to hang with him, especially not when they had to drag their cement shoes out to the three-point line. And now, they couldn't use their strength all the way out there either. Only 3 big men ranked in front of him and free throws attempted, and one of them was Shaq, which was just a product of good scouting. There wasn't anyone in the league that could stick Nowitzki, and his crew wasn't bad either. From spark plugs like a young Devin Harris to surly vets like Eric Dampier, Dallas had every card they needed, and Avery Johnson, their soft-spoken general, knew exactly when to play them. They won 60 games in the regular season, and rolled right past anyone the West threw in front of them. Tim Duncan and the dynastic Spurs defeated in 7 thanks to 37 and 15 from Dirk. Their old friend Steve Nash and his sons down in 6 after the pride of Wurzburg gave them 50 in Game 5. The coronation was already being planned, and the parade arrangements were being made. A championship seemed to be on its way in Dallas. The only thing left standing in their way was the Miami Heat. If the Mavericks were the future, proudly strutting into the finals, the Heat were the past, slyly sneaking onto the biggest stage. Miami was outdated, old-fashioned, and largely slow, from Shaq to Jason Williams and Gary Payton to Alonzo Mourning. Pat Riley's group was a balding batch of soldiers fighting for laws of tradition. But don't get us twisted, they were still a good basketball team. They didn't have the gaudy record or the revolutionary offense. They were more balanced in their approach, a more typical team with an inside presence and an outside force to complement it. We're purposefully glossing over him right now. Don't worry, we'll get there. They came from the East, a conference widely regarded as weaker than its warmer counterpart, but their road hadn't been easy. After a quick scare, there from Ben Gordon and the Bulls, Miami took apart Jason Kidd's nets before overcoming the 64-win defensive institution that was the Detroit Pistons. They weren't the favorites here. How could they be, over a team that had won 8 more games than them, but they weren't to be discounted. Both teams had to get through 3 rounds to be here. There were no easy games left, but when the series finally did tip off, you wouldn't know it. After the opening 2 games in the American Airlines Arena, the Heat looked overmatched. First, it was Jason Terry extending his pregame shoot-around, thanks to Shaq's drop coverage in Game 1. Then, it was Dirk doing what he'd done all year in Game 2. Miami just didn't have anyone that could bother him and move their feet with him. None of their bigs had the quickness or change of direction to do anything other than bump, nudge, or push him. Now with 6 minutes and 47 seconds remaining in Game 3, the Heat were down 11, staring down the barrel of a 3-0 hole. Then, in those final fading moments of hope, God's revenge re-entered the game. Dwyane Wade is a name known far and wide. It's the kind of immediately recognizable character that kills suspense, so we had to shelve this one for a while. But at this point in his career, at only 24 years old, there weren't many more dynamic slashers in the league. Wade had it all: the quickness to burst by perimeter defenders, the awareness to spin back against the grain, and the practice skill to softly kiss it off the glass in the trees. It was like watching sheet music dance to the rhythm. Beyond an elegant playstyle, Wade was realistically frightening, the kind of potential doom that draws its terror from its realism. With enough speed to be called the Flash, and enough athleticism to turn routine drives into posters, the young 2-guard was dangerous, uniquely positioned to thrive in the newly formatted landscape where quickness reigned supreme and athleticism trumped power. So far, Dallas had kept him at bay, barely in Game 1, but more securely in Game 2. Then there was another youngster that had entered the game only a minute earlier, an undersized, fleet-footed Floridian with more heart than you could view with an X-ray. Udonis Haslem had been a starter for Miami all year long, but as of the last minute, Pat Riley was asking him to do something different, to take on another level of responsibility and defend Dirk Nowitzki. The strategy had changed dramatically, but it had to. Their title hopes were on life support, quickly fading in front of them and their home crowd. The new plan was simple. On defense, Haslem would hedge the Terry Nowitzki pick and pop, recovering quickly after stalling Jets open mid-range to run Dirk off the 3-point line. On the other end, it was even more straightforward. Get the kid the ball and let him go to work. It started off slow, a subtle injection of life from the 2 prominent youngsters. Then, Wade got going, really going. Silky mid-ranges, graceful and-ones, and dives to the rim with enough hang time to evade every big man that came over on the help side. But above all else, the Flash got to the line. Without the ability to physically impede his progress, Dallas had no answer for the young 2-guard. By the end of the game, Wade would shoot 18 free throws. Between his offensive dominance and Haslem's defensive disruption, the gap was closing, but they needed more. And that's when the old guys came to the party. Jason Williams was making plays like it was 1998. Shaq was draining clutch free throws, and when they absolutely needed it, Gary Payton stepped up and hit the go-ahead shot with only a couple seconds left. A Dirk missed free throw on the other end sealed the deal. The Heat had come back from the grave, and the momentum had a new muse. Most people didn't see the gravity of what took place, the stark changes in direction here, and what it meant in this series moving forward. But Game 4 woke everyone up. Behind Wade's dynamism and Haslem's hard-nosed grit, Miami stifled Dirk and ran away with the contest, disassembling the Mavs in a 98-74 win. Game 5 felt like a test of integrity, an isolated event where team records were thrown out the window and the series score faded into the background. You got something you want to say? Guess not. We saw a little bit of everything. High pressure heroics from both D-Wade and Dirk, crunch time highlights from aging legends and supportive stars. But after a beautiful Nowitzki fall-away gave the Mavs a 1-point lead with 10 seconds to go in overtime, the time had come for Mark Cuban's franchise to reap what he had sown. Dwyane Wade worked through the initial double team, attacked the rim, and got the call. Devin Harris was beside himself. Avery Johnson would go on to give a rather chilly response to the call in the postgame. The game was being called differently. Incidental and slight contact that was once par for the course was by rule a foul. And if the player was in the act of shooting, it was 2 free throws. This hadn't come out of nowhere. It was a request put in by the same man who cut Johnson's checks. And as that cold-blooded 24-year-old drained both those free throws, the twisted irony had to have hit Cuban. Game 6 was it. One final chance to curb the towering wave of energy and force a deciding Game 7. Even with Wade turning in a masterpiece, Haslam delivering the best performance of his career, and Miami relentlessly doubling Dirk every time he touched the ball in the fourth, the Mavs had a shot. Down only 1 point after a Jerry Stackhouse 3, all Dallas needed was a stop here, and then their awe-inspiring offense would be given the opportunity they had worked for all year. But sometimes, fate prefers to be cruel, even if that means being redundant. As Dwyane Wade avoided the trap and drove hard down the lane, he collided with a moving Nowitzki, and you've probably already guessed what happened next. 2 free throws and a half-court turnover later, and the series was over. Miami had come back from the dead, lifted on the wings of an ascending super talent and his one kind of burst. In those last 4 games, Wade shot 18, 9, 25, and 21 free throws. In total, he shot 75 free throws in the series, the most by a single player in one finals since Elgin Baylor in 1962. You play the cards you're dealt, and if there's a way to make your hand more advantageous, you see it through. No leverage is inconsequential, and no edge is insignificant. But regardless of how well you know your hand, your opponents will always remain a mystery to you. You can't fault Mark Cuban here for attempting to correct what he believed to be a structural wrong, and you definitely can't blame him for emphasizing an area that would seemingly benefit his team. Cuban had played his hand well, and the league followed suit, but in the end, it was Wade who cashed out. Good team owners advocate for their teams, and great ones make good on their propositions, but you don't know the ripples until you throw the rock. The 2006 finals were a lot of things: a strategic masterclass from basketball's godfather, the triumphant arrival of a transcendent star, and the scar that would eventually fuel the redemption of an all-time great. But underneath all the currents and subcurrents, it was a reiteration of a lesson as old as the stories themselves. The poignant aphorism from the pen of Aesop: be careful what you wish for.